Welcome everyone to the POLARIN webinar on planning polar fieldwork. Before we get started, I wanted to inform you of a few housekeeping notes, and the first one being that we are holding this webinar under the APECS Code of Conduct, and if you're not very familiar with that, that basically means that we ask everyone to be respectful to each other. And if you want to familiarize yourself or remind you of the Code of Conduct, you can find that on the APECS website. We are recording this webinar to make it available later publicly. Your video and audio is not recorded unless you actually unmute or turn on your video when you're asking a question. But with that being said, it would be really nice for all of our presenters if they can actually see who is in the webinar. So it would be great if you can turn on your camera if possible. If you have any questions during the presentations, feel free to ask them in the chat. We have divided the webinar into different sections, and we will have a question and answers block after each of them. We will see if we take questions that only are directed to one of the speakers directly after or in that combined block, but your questions won't get lost. So either note them down during the webinar or feel free to already post them in the chat and then we can go through. Alternatively, you can also in that dedicated questions time, just use the raise your hand feature and then unmute and ask your question directly to our speakers. We are really happy to welcome you all to this webinar, and today we want to focus on planning polar fieldwork, and more specifically planning safe, sustainable and efficient stays at polar research infrastructures, may it be on land or at sea. And this webinar is organized by the POLARIN project, the Polar Research Infrastructure Network, and we'll give you an introduction to that project shortly. But before that, we wanted to give you, or to briefly explain where we aim at with this webinar, and that is really to give you a broad overview, to give you an idea of what topics to consider, what to take care of in your planning phase for your fieldwork. But even though this is a relatively long webinar, we cannot provide in-depth training for all of the relevant topics. And especially, we also want to highlight that a webinar cannot replace actual practical training. So we encourage you to seek that where necessary and helpful. And that is true, especially when it comes to safety training. As I said earlier, we have divided the webinar into different sections. First, we'll start with a general introduction to the project and also give you an overview about the activities, the training work package. So one of the work packages within the project, the planned activities and planned materials and resources that we're currently working on there. Before we go into an overview of what you should consider for planning, then targeting more safety aspects and also including environmental impacts and approaches to collaboration with local and indigenous communities too. Before later in the webinar, we are having a focus on training for data stewardship. That is also run by colleagues from the project that are responsible for the data management within POLARIN. And we'll briefly hear relevant tips and guidelines when it comes to media production and outreach activities related to your polar fieldwork. Where you see those lines, we will have short breaks of roughly 10 minutes. We will see how that works out with the schedule, but you don't have to be afraid. We won't be continuing to talk for 4 hours, and there will be before any of these breaks, you will have the time to ask questions to our speakers and presenters. I briefly wanted to highlight that this webinar is not only organized by me. My name is Axel Flintwein. I work for APECS, the Association of Polar Early Career Scientists in the International Directorate, but it's also developed in collaboration with other partners in the POLARIN project and specifically within the training work package, which you can see here on the slide. And some of them you will hear as presenters today and others can't be here today. But this is a bigger team that is working towards all this training material, including this webinar that we are hosting today. With that, I would like to hand over to Veronica to provide a short introduction on the POLARIN project itself.
Thank you very much, Axel, for this nice introduction. I will share my screen to give you a brief introduction. It's okay, can you see it? Yes, huh? It works, okay, very good. Yeah, so I'll give a little introduction on the POLARIN project, who we are, what are we doing, basically. So POLARIN is a project funded by Horizon Europe on the work program for research infrastructures. We are funded with 15 million euros. The project is coordinated by AVI, the Alfred Wegener Institute in Germany. Currently, we are 52 partners, but we are growing. We have, in our consortium of 52 partners, we have currently 64 research infrastructures. And what we provide is the research infrastructure services. Among them, of course, access to infrastructures, but also training and also data, you will see. We are not starting out of the blue. So POLARIN is building on previous achievements made by other projects where we have been involved, such as Eurofleets, which was giving access to marine research infrastructures, Interact, a very successful and very long in duration project that was giving access to research stations in the Arctic. Arise, also in the Arctic, but providing access to research icebreakers. And now 2 other projects are in the pipeline, is Aquarius and POLARIN. Aquarius marine infrastructures and POLARIN access to infrastructures in the Arctic and Antarctic marine and terrestrial realms. The overall aim of POLARIN is to provide efficient and customized research infrastructure services to address the scientific challenges. As you know, we had built our calls for proposals around this set of 7 key research challenges in polar regions. And this includes the access to a wide portfolio of complementary and interdisciplinary research infrastructures. We have 3 main objectives in POLARIN. One is to integrate and combine the access to these infrastructures, to improve online services, data access and interoperability, and also to ensure that the new generations are trained to exploit these leading edge research infrastructures. Among the 64 research infrastructures we have in POLARIN, we have 38 research stations, 12 polar vessels, 18 observatories, 4 ice and sediment core repositories, and 7 data infrastructures. We provide transnational access to the first 4, either in person or remote. Remote means that applicants can request to get samples taken by the technicians, for example, in these places, or virtual access to data. The access is fully funded for research projects which are addressing the key questions in the polar regions. 27 of our research stations are located in the Arctic, very well distributed from Alaska, Greenland, Svalbard, a very big hub in Svalbard as well, and also in Northern Europe. 11 Antarctic stations, some of them in the Antarctic Peninsula, where we have the biggest conglomerate of stations, but also in Dronning Land with Neumayer, Vasa, and Troll, for example, or access as well to Concordia and Mario Zucchelli. We offer access to 12 polar research vessels. Some of them are operating only in the Arctic, others only in the Antarctic, but we have a big, quite a big set that are operating in both poles. We have also new information. We are preparing now currently an amendment. If everything goes well, in the next call, we will be able to offer as well the vessel Mirai 2, which is the new icebreaker from Jamstec, Japan. So if everything goes well, this will be also offered very soon in our portfolio. We also offer access to observatories. Some of them, or most of them, are actually associated to terrestrial research stations, but we also offer the opportunity to install sensors in the Deep Sea Observatory from Alfred Wegener Institute, and also access to observational networks as well, where you could install your own instrumentation, such as Greenland ecosystem monitoring. We are as well contributing to the improvement of data landscape and the consumption of data with a single entry portal, the POLARIN Hub, offering virtual access to data. And also we will create data products from environmental databases to be used directly by researchers and decision makers. We also offer this sediment core access to samples from sediment core and ice core repositories. And I would like to give you a little bit of an introduction or a resume of what happened with the call for proposals, because most of you are certainly successful applicants. So just for your information, we received 96 proposals, 86 of them were eligible. We offer access to 49 research infrastructures, and the user group leaders were from 24 countries. Requested budget was originally 2 million, almost circa 3 million euros. Most of the proposals were tackling the polar ecosystems and biodiversity challenge, followed by the terrestrial carbon cycle and permafrost. And in the preliminary results from the call, we say preliminary because at that moment we are still in the negotiation phase, but it seems that 36 projects will be granted to access in total 26 research infrastructures. 30% are user groups with non-EU majority, so either non-European or associated countries. And we are granting, so the early career research, this is important, is circa 40% or 39%. And we are granting circa 2 million euros in this call. What is next for POLARIN? We are implementing the access already now in 2025. The first teams are going on the field already in May. We are implementing digital tools for data access. This is the POLARIN data portal, or data hub, actually, which will open officially in 2025, but you can already explore it. You can access it through the POLARIN website. And we will open the second call for proposals on the 1st of September this year, with the highlights of the Tara polar stations in the high Arctic, access to Mirai 2, if everything goes well, in the Arctic Ocean, and also the polar research vessel Polarsten in the frame of Antarctica in sync. And that's it. This is our consortium. Thank you. Thanks to this consortium, we are able to provide access to all this enormous set of research infrastructures and also contribute to data and as well training the new generations. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Veronica. We can just straight continue with Michele, who is one of the work package leads for the training work package, to give you a short overview over the training activities in POLARIN.
I'm Michele Rebesco from OGS, Italy, and together with Morten from the University of Copenhagen, we are leading the work package 7 of POLARIN, which is about training the new generation of infrastructure users. So this training is either on land and at sea, both for Arctic and Antarctica. Why is training important? Well, first of all, to utilize the polar infrastructure in an efficient, safe, and sustainable way. Then data, as you know, are very important because in the polar area it's quite difficult to gain data. And so it's essential that these data are managed according to the FAIR principle and are of benefit for everyone in terms of availability and also the associated products and tools about the data. Of course, it is also important to engage early career researchers in order to have an impact past the project period, because the early career researchers of today will be the full researchers of tomorrow. How do we think to develop the training? Basically, I can use the laser. Yeah, okay. Either with the e-learning modules, online seminar like this one that we are presently having, also some printed material, and finally with a kind of pilot implementation of a field safety training for expedition in the polar area. This will be a kind of the development of a concept and will be eventually further developed in the future. When is the training? It is mainly connected to the 3 goals for national assess grants that we aim to issue in POLARIN. So following each goal, the beneficiaries are trained when they start planning their work. So in fact, you have been contacted immediately after receiving the grant to set up this training session. But nevertheless, the training package is advertised and open to all interested users of polar research infrastructure in general. So not only the POLARIN, the winner of the POLARIN grants. The online training platform, all online training content that we are developing now will be openly accessible to one central platform, which will be hosted by APECS. And this will include the features to help anyone to find the relevant material, which is pertinent to your own fieldwork, your area of study, and will include a variety of formats, which is either videos, guidebooks, articles, and yeah, the idea of having one central platform is to facilitate the access to what is already existing in the among the training resources. The idea is to launch this platform and to have it available in September this year. The brochure and the development and the topics are this one: planning for polar fieldwork, safety in polar fieldwork, data stewardship, and then ethics in polar research and impact of polar research. And this will be either online guidebooks wrote by this team that are expected to be available toward the end of this year. And some material will be also printed. So this is just to give you a flavor of how the printed brochures may look like. And you may contribute to the training material. In fact, a call for early career researchers as co-authors has been already issued, and there was a news in the POLARIN and the APECS site. And so we are working together with a group of about 50 early career researchers in order to collect the training resources and develop the online training. But you, as national assessed users, may still contribute by sending us some training resources in the form of documents, webinar, or whatever that you like to be included. And so please send your materials to this email, info@apex.is, and we will consider including in the training material that we are developing. So I think this may be enough about the work package 7. So thanks for your attention.
The next presentation, which will be from Morten, the other co-lead of the work package, and he will start to introduce you to the planning process for polar fieldwork, covering both aspects of the Arctic and Antarctica with relation to terrestrial and marine fieldwork. So we're trying to cover a lot in this webinar, and we can only go so far into in-depth training, but please see all of the following presentations as encouraging you to get to know which topics are relevant and then read more, learn more about them also after this event. Morten, please go.
Cool, thanks a lot. Yeah, my name is Morten, and I will speak a little bit about fieldwork planning, and of course covering fieldwork planning for research vessels and research stations in both Antarctica and the Arctic in 25 minutes is a big mouthful. So my presentation will be quite generic. Besides that, I will not put very much emphasis on safety, environmental issues and ethics, because it's covered by other presentations. Just to introduce myself, I have been working with research stations in the Arctic throughout most of my work life. 3 different research stations in Greenland. I've been expedition leader or scientific leader of at least one scientific expedition to remote polar areas since 2000. Then I've been the chairman of INTAC Station Manager Forum for 13 years, and I'm co-authoring or editor of all the INTAC fieldwork related books. And let me go to the end. Oh yeah, and then I've been living in Greenland for 8 years in a very small community. This is just to say, listen to me. I have survived, and it's a good idea to listen. Currently, I'm working with this beauty. It's a 3-mast top-gallant schooner that we are renovating and making into a state-of-the-art research platform. And among other things, she will be part of a fleet of sailing boats participating in the project in Sync Antarctica. The content of my presentation, I will start to say a little bit about safety first. Then I will say something about being well prepared. Then I will jam a little bit about the differences between the Arctic and Antarctica. I'll talk a little bit about research infrastructures. Then I will talk a lot about fieldwork planning, and then I will introduce you to some further resources by the end. You know, safety is always the first priority, I kind of want to tell a story here. You know, I've been doing expeditions for many years, and my daughter, she have almost the same education as me, and she fell in love with a Norwegian guy, and I fully understand why. He was a mountain climber, he was a skier, he was an outdoor expert, he knew everything. And you know, every year when I went on an expedition, she asked me, can't you take my boyfriend with you as a field assistant? And there was nothing I wanted the less. And just to tell you why, mountaineering and mountain climbing and extreme skiing, it's about challenging your safety and of course feeling relatively safe. I would, and he could make snow pits and predict the chance of snow avalanches and things like that. But, you know, I would never go into areas in which there's a risk for snow avalanches. I would just keep away. So it would just be disturbance with this information. And that's important to have in mind, that while you are on fieldwork, professional fieldwork, then your safety is first priority. And then you can keep the mountain climbing and the extreme skiing and so on until you are back at holiday or something like that. But during your field work, safety is your highest priority. And you can't be as safe in polar regions as you would be in a forest or a town in Central Europe or in your laboratory and so on. It's just a matter of avoiding the dangerous stuff. You should be extra cautious, and it might sound a little over the top, but if you are more than 1 hour walk away from your research infrastructure, of course, if weather is bad or unpredictable, always look at the weather forecast. if you are in mountainous areas or if you are in areas with dangerous wildlife. And then you should avoid, unless you could say that it's part of your research theme, glaciers, unstable sea ice, deep mountainsides, and snow and rock avalanche areas. Sarah and Axel will say much more about this in their presentation. Then about being well prepared. You should, before you go, and that should also be kind of your mindset, you should notice that the field work is, without comparison, the most expensive part of your work life, and you should pay due respect to that. You should also be aware that the field work is the most intensive part of a research project. Within a very short time period, you are going to gather data for at least your next year of work. And therefore, it's also a good idea to be very well prepared. You should plan things cautiously down to the minor details. It's about knowing your instruments in advance. It's a good idea to have, if you're going to use a new instrument, then have it delivered to your institution a few months before and test it. And it's all the way down to even the GPS that you're going to use during your fieldwork. You should prepare cautiously your data gathering and storage. There will be much more about this later on. You should prepare cautiously the transport of you and your equipment, and you should be out in good time in relation to these things. You should prepare in advance the character of the research infrastructure. Read any written material about laboratory facilities and so on. If somebody have pictures of the laboratories, it's a very big help. Pictures tell much more than a lot of lines. Then you should prepare in advance, of course, on the environment you will work in, the climate, the landscape, and community. Often you could go for either, you could say tourist brochures, you could also just go for more popular science publications and stuff like that. But read it, it will help you once you are at site. Then you should secure that you have appropriate means of communication and other safety equipment. Means of communication are without comparison the most important safety equipment. Having at least two alternative ways of communicating with others is mandatory in relation to fieldwork. And then you should, of course, make sure that you have your relevant permits to do whatever you're going to do, and that you have the relevant insurances. Most of you are working for public institutions, and then you probably have some kind of self-insurance system. And then you should seek training on whatever could be relevant. It could be first aid, it could be rifle training if you go into areas with polar bears and so on. And then you should prepare not only with a plan, but with a plan A and a plan B and plan C, and you should do that already in advance. It might be, and you will probably end up using a plan D or plan E or plan F, but it is much easier to adjust to plan D, E, or F if you already in advance have a plan A, B, and C. You should make sure well in advance and during your fieldwork that all members of your research group are involved in the planning. So it might be that you are responsible for the planning, but it's a very good idea to have as many meetings as possible during the planning. And then you should make sure that the research infrastructure well in advance and during your fieldwork is thoroughly informed about your project, and if changes appear, that they are aware of that. Then I will say a little bit about the Arctic. The pictures down, I can tell you the picture to the left, it's Uummannaq in Greenland. And the picture to the right is somewhere in Antarctica. There are quite big differences between the Arctic and Antarctica. One very big difference is that the Arctic consists of 8 independent countries, all having their own jurisdiction in relation to certain research activities, while Antarctica is a neutral continent set aside as a scientific preserve. And this makes huge differences in relation to the administrative procedures and the handling of logistics in relation to staying at research infrastructures. In Antarctica, you could, for most research infrastructures, depend on that the research logistics and planning in relation to visiting the research stations are handled mainly in cooperation with the national institutions owning the research infrastructures. In the Arctic, you can often, in general, arrange your own travels by commercial aircraft or by coordinated charter flights. And you can also have your cargo transported there by commercial shipping companies. I think that's the main differences. Most of the POLARIN research infrastructures have site manuals describing in detail and step by step what to do in relation to your planning, and stay at specific research infrastructures and read them well in advance, and maybe even before you start planning your fieldwork. And then I will say a little bit about research infrastructures. We have kind of, you could say, three very different research infrastructure types in POLARIN. We have Arctic research stations, we have Antarctic research station, and we have research vessels. And then, of course, we also have the data infrastructures, but that is not covered here. You could say the main differences is that in the Arctic, you might meet very small research infrastructures, and they might be research infrastructures that are managed by one person or even one part-time person. So you could say the level of support is also adjusted to that. On research vessels, you will probably meet the highest safety level. You might not even be allowed to do the sampling yourself. It's taken care of until the samples are on deck by the crew, and then you can take whatever you want in relation to samples, while on research stations that is a little bit more easy. The Antarctica is very remote, and that also means that it can be difficult to get away if you should get ill, and that also means that you will often see that there's a need for a health declaration before going to Antarctic research station, while that is not the case in the Arctic. And then, of course, it's difficult. The Antarctic is difficult to access, and that means that the transport of people and cargo is often also something that is taken care of by the research infrastructure. Then for the Arctic, some of the stations might be near to or in local communities, so you will meet local people and you will be able to cooperate with them, while that is not the case in Antarctica. And then for the Arctic, there's also often a need for yourself to make sure that you can get the permits needed for your fieldwork, and that means that you will have to contact the local authorities to at least get a permission to export your samples. Then I think I've been talking about this, that then there's small versus large infrastructures, and it's important to notice when you start out that at small research stations, you should expect less service than on larger research infrastructures. And that means that you could say the logistical challenge is also bigger. You sometimes need to make sure that you have your provision yourself. You sometimes also need to take care completely of your own safety, and even transfers to and from the research infrastructures might also be your responsibility, while at the Antarctic station, you often just need to go to the nearest airport, and then you will be flown in with charter aircraft one way or the other. Support from the research infrastructures. You should be aware that, of course, the staff at the research infrastructures are there for you, to support you. That's their work. But you should also be aware that research infrastructures normally have a very limited staff covering a lot of issues and supporting up to 100 scientists per year. And that means that, that their time is quite limited. So therefore, you should, of course, be in contact with them. You should communicate with them by email with all the questions you have. But it's a good idea to kind of gather your questions, and it's a good idea not to send an email every time a question appears. Write it down and then ask once or twice during your planning. And before you do so, read the material provided by the station and also read general information about the area. That will probably help you very long along the way. So collect your questions, and you might also, consult people from your own institutions who have already been at the research infrastructures. They might also have a lot of information that is relevant for you. Once you are at the research stations, respect the office hours of the infrastructure staff. They also need to sleep once in a while. So if we look at who is taking care of you at the research infrastructures, then you could say that there's a kind of line from research vessels where very much things are taken care of by the crew, and down to very small Arctic infrastructures where you won't need much help. Some research infrastructures might demand a disclaimer saying that you are at the research infrastructure at your own responsibility. I know that this is very much the case for most Arctic research infrastructures, while others might not. They take care of you while you are there. Of course, you will still always be covered by your workers' compensation insurance while you are on field work, but talk with your employer about insurance issues before you go. Relevant insurances could be a travel insurance, and for some research stations also a search and rescue insurance. And then we come to fieldwork planning. And you could say the thing starts up with your preparing for planning. And you have already prepared much of the planning because in your project descriptions, you have already described what you are going to do. You know your scientific questions. You have probably also been thinking about what method you will use. Is it possible for you, Axel, to mute? Cool, thanks. And you know what data and samples you need, what instrumentation and equipment you need, and approximately how long time you will need for the sampling. You might also already have been looking into the physical setting, the biology, the climate, and the facilities at the research infrastructure. But it is always a good idea to start your preparation by running through your project proposal again. Time has been going and now it's very concrete, so you might look at it with different eyes. And then, of course, it's a good idea in this phase also to gather all relevant information, and that could be maps, that could be books and folders, that could be climate statistics. Be as prepared in what you will need as possible. Then once you start the planning, it's a long process, so start well in advance. Some of you are going on fieldwork already soon, so you have to start already by now, and the rest of you, I would recommend also to start already by now. Make sure that your instrumentation and equipment are ready. Make test runs with them. Organize your travels. especially in the Arctic, tickets for your destinations might be sold out due to tourism in the areas. So it's a good idea to have your travel tickets early, and it's a good idea to have refundable airline tickets. Also secure that the transfers are in place. In some places, a transfer is just a taxi from the airport, but you might have a lot of cargo with you. In other areas, like, for example, Sagenberg Research Station in northeast Greenland, it's a 4.5-hour flight with a charter aircraft. Organize the transport of your equipment to the research infrastructure and ship it a very good time in advance. If there are several, for example, ships going to your infrastructure, then don't rely on the last one, take the one before and make sure that you have all customs declarations and stuff like that in place. It's often a good idea to involve a shipping company in this. Then decide on the specific site for your experiments observations. You have probably been talking about what you will be doing at the research site. Now look carefully into a map and whatever information you can have and decide on the specific site and talk with the infrastructure about whether it's a good site and possible. Of course, if it has been used by others before, it might be contaminated and so on. So there's a lot to look into. And then secure that you have all your permits and insurances in place. And visa if relevant. And then find out whatever training you might need. It could be first aid training, it could be rifle training, it could be normal mountaineering, and so on. Some training might be demanded by the research infrastructures, some might be demanded by your home institution, and some might simply be something that you want yourself. Then after all these things, it's time to kind of, you could say, plan the actual field work. It's a good idea to gather your group and to make a risk assessment and a risk management plan. It's mainly a matter of brainstorming about what risk can be experienced during the field work, and then talk about how you can assess them or mitigate them. It's a good idea to make a time schedule. You could say that the time schedule is the plan A. So think about the time schedule once you have made it, and think about a plan B and plan C. And remember to put a lot of time in for down days. 30% down days are not unusual in polar and marine fieldwork. Organize your team by agreeing on who is responsible for what. It might be that somebody should lead the safety while others should take care that the instruments are in good order, and some are responsible for whatever, data gathering and so on. But it's good to know in advance who is responsible for what, and that you have a substitute for each responsibility. Make a data management plan. Dan will talk more about this later, and also make a, you could say, standardized system for labeling samples and so on, so that you come home with something that is that looks the same. And then make an environmental assessment about your fieldwork to secure that you leave your study site the least affected by your activities. This might be mandatory for some access permit applications, but it's, you know, also the proper way of doing things. And then once you have all these plans in place, then write them down and gather them in a well-organized way in actual physical folders that you can bring along with you, and that you can have lying in the living room or whatever, and collect all relevant permits, collect all airline tickets. It might be that somebody have lost one of them or whatever, bills of lading, manuals of relevance to the research infrastructure, and manuals for your instruments, so that you have everything in one place. And it's also a good idea to make a backup of all this material. Then once you arrive at the research station, gather your equipment and make sure that everything has arrived in good order. It might be that transport has been hard to it and that you need some repair and so on before you go into the field. So look at the instruments, try to start them up and so on. Familiarize yourself with the research infrastructure. It could be the laboratories, storage facilities, dining room, and whatever you would need. And also the surroundings. Go for a walk. And very important, the local community. Many scientists simply miss the opportunity or don't think about how much you can gain from actually cooperating with the local community. But of course, it's also relevant in relation to knowing where are the medical service, shop, police, and so on, if there is a local community close by. Check the weather forecast for the days to come. YR normally gives up to 14 days weather forecast. You can't depend on them, but it's a way of preparing your planning, you could say. And of course, you should follow the weather forecast at least once every day during your entire stay. If relevant and possible, make a short visit at your study site. Make sure that it is in accordance with your expectations. If not already planned by the research infrastructure, ask for a meeting with the station staff to talk about plans, specific restrictions, and also, you could say, the weather forecast for the days to come and stuff like that. And then once you have done all these things, then re-evaluate, and you should do that as a group meeting, re-evaluate and update your risk assessment plan and your time schedule based on the information you receive. It might be that something is different. And then gather the equipment for your first day of fieldwork, and if relevant, organize yourself in the laboratory. All the pictures of nice people from Greenland underneath is just to emphasize that it's a good idea to cooperate with the locals. They know a lot. They live there. They both can help you in relation to safety issues, but they also have a long history of knowledge about the environment that they live in. During the fieldwork, carry through your fieldwork according to the time schedule. Ideally, you should just be able to follow the time schedule. That will never happen, but follow it as much as possible. And then make sure to write down everything. And with everything, I really mean everything. When did you arrive at the study site? What was the weather like? When did you start measuring? Did you experience irregularities, misfunctioning of instruments, disturbance of the study site, and so on, and note it by time. It might be trivial while you are out in the field, but when you come back and look at data 2 months later, then it might help you. A diary might also help you. The diary could cover both the more work-related activities you are doing, but also things that might help your brain remembering what day was that and what was happening and so on. So also describing a party, a visit at the local museum, birthdays and so on. Make at least 2 daily backups of your data and make sure that they are well organized according to your data management plan. If relevant, keep pace with your laboratory work, rather do it today. Also, if it becomes a very long day, then waiting until tomorrow, and then arrange daily meetings in the group to evaluate the work so far. It can't be just sitting and talking about the work you have been doing over breakfast, but it's always a good idea to kind of evaluate every day and make small changes if necessary. The last day of your field work, set aside enough time to finish your work and to clean up at the study site. Make sure that your equipment, the equipment and samples that you need to send back to your home institution is ready well in advance. And if you use a shipping company, then it's always a good idea to go down and send it a couple of days in advance. There might be problems with customs and so on, so reserve some time for that. And then it set time aside to go through your data. You can't make much differences to them, but you can make remarks and so on while you have it still in mind. And then set time aside to evaluate the entire fieldwork in the group and a list of what could be good to do next time. Remember to say thank you to all those who have helped you during the fieldwork, both at the research station and in the local community. And if relevant, be well organized with your flight tickets. I can't tell you how many times I have experienced that people have been so busy either up to their travel to a research infrastructure or on the way back, that they are standing in the airport and don't know where their airline tickets are. So it's always a good idea to be out in good advance and be well organized in relation to that. Once you arrive in your home country, make sure before going home that you have delivered all data and samples that you might have brought with you as carry-on luggage at the right place. It could be in the freezers, refrigerators, and storage facilities at your home institution, and then take a couple of days rest and be happy that you actually did it. I'll end by recommending a few further resources. It's too comprehensive to go through all further resources. POLARIN will work on gather this material in a more accessible way, but most Antarctic research stations have extensive information material for visitors, and the same goes for Arctic research stations and research vessels. So check the internet for information material about your specific research facility. Then the EU project INTERACT has, in cooperation with the Association of Polar Early Career Scientists, produced a long range of textbooks of relevance to mainly fieldwork in the Arctic. But I tell you, for most of them, they are also very relevant to Antarctic fieldwork. And I will especially recommend during your planning the book called Fieldwork Planning Handbook, and during your fieldwork, the Practical Field Guide. There's a lot of good information in that. You can also learn about environmental considerations in relation to both CO2 emission of your fieldwork and how to reduce the plastic consumption during your fieldwork. Then for Arctic projects, and this is only for Arctic projects, the EU project INTERACT has also made an overview of all regulations and permits of relevance for Arctic fieldwork. And I just give you the link here. I think that the presentations will be available on the POLARIN homepage so that you can find it after this webinar. But it's a good place to go if you are looking for what permits do I need for Arctic countries at least. And that was it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Morten. We had one question, which you might partially have answered already with your last slide.
Okay, cool.
Asking about the permits, but maybe Alison, if you want to add anything, I can briefly try to summarize first, and if you want to add, please feel free to unmute. So the question is about where to find information about permit applications. Since the Arctic is made up of 8 nations, are there 8 different portals, or basically where to find information about which permits to apply and how to apply to them for Arctic research?
Yes,
thank you. Can I just add to the? Thank you for this, and that link, will be helpful. But also, if your research is done in the context of partnering with the expedition vessels who are IACO members, is that also a different, or is that addressed in this link you shared? That would be great to know. Thank you.
And I have to tell you that I'm not aware about that. When you go to international sea, I'm not aware about that at all. You know, we're pretty new in relation to this information, and we are working hard on gathering more information of relevance to POLARIN, but this is the first webinar. The best way to figure it out is to contact the contact person of the host institution owning the ship, and then they will probably help you.
Thank you.
Cool.
Yep, please, Veronica.
Yes, thank you. Exactly. I was going to highlight what Morten said right now. Contact the operator. It can be for that. It has to go. It depends where it's located. It might have to go through your national polar program, this application, or through the vessel flag. I assume you got access to the Le Commandant Charcot. Discuss that first of all with the Commandant Charcot. Contact the science coordinator.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because these ships go into different nations' waters, so maybe they have a umbrella blanket permit.
Yeah, not really. You will have to apply specifically for your research, most likely, and then and the vessel will coordinate that because they need all the permits. So discuss with them what you need to get and what they will get for you.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Cool. I organized my that it can actually be used as a to-do list in your preparation. So I hope it will be available somehow so that people can use it for that purpose as well.
Yeah, and this is also, these kind of checklists or to-do lists is what we are trying to develop together in this project to make them available for different infrastructures. But yeah, just keep in mind that they are all on a broad level. So as it came out during the question now, often it is good advice to talk to your research infrastructure. With this next part of the webinar, we want to focus on planning and conducting safe polar fieldwork. So talking specifically about various aspects of safety when it comes to mostly the planning of polar fieldwork. And it is hopefully not a surprise to you, as Morten highlighted, that safety should be your first priority. But we want to briefly take a look at why safety is especially important in polar environments. And that is because of the environment everyone is operating in, and also the limited infrastructure and communication capacity, delayed rescue times, and unpredictable weather shifts, challenging environmental conditions that both amplify risks, but also mean that small mistakes can escalate quickly and become larger incidents if there is no proper planning to mitigate those risks. And as part of this webinar, we want to focus, as I said, on the aspects of planning, especially on preparation, communication, and prevention as three core concepts to help you keep both yourself, your team, but also the environment you're working in safe. And to briefly summarize that, preparation is the idea to mitigate risks by having a proper plan. And much of that, of what I'm going to speak about now, sounds probably a bit repetitive to what Morten presented, but a lot of these aspects of planning are closely linked to aspects of safety. And communication is key, not only having the means of communication, but also being clear and using them both within your team, but also back to your infrastructure helps to both deal with developing incidents, but also, again, to prevent them, which is much smarter than having to react and actually implement an emergency response. So what are hazards that when doing polar fieldwork can be encountered? And probably one you think of first, or maybe think of first, is wildlife you can encounter, but it's also natural hazards, especially linked to challenging weather and challenging environmental conditions under which you're operating. And all of that is happening mostly in not always, but mostly in remote areas. So the combination of those factors can pose risks, and we want to look into how you can avoid these risks from affecting your work, because again, coming back to Morten's presentation, it is the aim to deal with them and to mitigate them ahead of time, so that working outside or in remote environments, in polar conditions as part of your polar fieldwork is not more dangerous than other work you normally do. In addition to these factors that we just mentioned, fieldwork often includes activities or actions that bear risks themselves, and that includes the use of various vehicles like snowmobiles, small aircraft, small boats, zodiacs that come with their own risks, each of them handling tools, especially power tools, as part of your work. And that also links to operating instruments, for example, on board vessels. Sometimes this is done by the crew, especially on larger vessels. But if you're working on smaller boats, this is also something to consider. In addition, in relation to logistics and freight, if not being handled by infrastructure personnel, moving heavy objects poses certain risks. But also what is sometimes overseen, just working in a laboratory, that is a type of work that poses certain types of risks that need to be mitigated. So is the simple life in a field camp, if you think about the stove or a fire, that is relevant to consider when planning how to avoid these risks of affecting your work. Next, we want to think about safety from different angles and different perspectives, one of which being mostly physical safety that is closely linked to the environment the research infrastructure is in, and that is for sure a changing environment throughout the seasons. So different seasons might require different measures, for example, to mitigate these natural risks that are induced by the environment the infrastructure is placed in for terrestrial infrastructures or operating in for vessels that can change due to where they are and what kind of procedures have they in place to deal with that. So that is another point to consider when thinking of a more physical safety perspective, is to educate yourself about the procedures of that infrastructure ahead of time, because the infrastructure operators have a lot of experience with that environment and how to work in that environment. So following these established procedures and also knowing of the emergency routines is key, both to at first avoid incidents, but then in a secondary step, if there were some to be occur, also to handle them efficiently and safely. All of the above requires appropriate training. And again, here it is important to highlight that listening to a webinar cannot replace practical training for some aspects, especially when it comes to physical safety. And we'll talk a bit more in detail about later what types of training that could mean. And I just briefly wanted to highlight, and these are not all the infrastructures that are in POLARIN, but coming back to Morten's presentation again, every infrastructure is different and requires different planning. And that does not only apply to the scientific perspective on your fieldwork, that also applies to all the safety measures you in collaboration with the infrastructure want to or have to implement to make your fieldwork safe. So if you have a plan that works for one infrastructure and you have a risk assessment that works for one infrastructure, that is not necessarily the same, and you shouldn't just copy paste that for another infrastructure, because you have to take into account the specific environment, the specific procedures and protocols these infrastructures operate under. In addition to what is often considered the more physical safety, it is also important to highlight that you're humans working in these environments, and both, to be able to deal with very intense experiences during that field work, because the work is very different from what you normally would do at your home institution. It is also important that you work in a very small team. So building up trust with other team members in preparation of your fieldwork is very critical, and that it can help to build up trust by committing and developing a code of conduct together as a team. And for that, coming together, talking through experiences others might have had or know about, or challenges they know about they might face during that fieldwork, and preparing for that together. And in the field itself, prioritizing, looking out for each other, and also respecting personal space, which is often, a challenge due to the situation you're working in, which is different from normal work environments. So facilitating all of that, it is key to establish good communication routines and be clear with your team members about what is expected from each of them. And again, coming back to defining responsibilities and defining protocols of how to work together can really help. And often clear communication is the first step to avoid any problems from coming up. We also want, as a third lens, look at environmental safety, and I will just very briefly go over this because we will highlight this in a talk afterwards. But consider this to go in both directions. Consider the impact the environment can have on you and your team, but also the safety of the environment. So what impact you have on your environment. And measures to increase that aspect of safety include, for example, reducing risk for contamination and generally having established a strict waste management. So bringing everything that you bring into the field also back out with you. And especially when it comes to flora and fauna, it is important to just be aware of that environment and also to minimize the disturbance, if we were to summarize that very briefly. All of these aspects, they come together. Achieving one helps to get better with the other one, and vice versa. So having a physically safe team puts less stress on everyone, and a team that has established good collaboration routines will be physically safer, and both together will also allow that team to, at the same time as of doing their work, take care of their environment. So really try to think all of these perspectives together, both in your planning, but also during your work. In the next point, we want to go into what measures can we actually do in the planning process to make polar fieldwork safer. Coming back to the concepts of preparation, it is really critical to make very detailed plans, look at weather patterns ahead of time, what is usually to be expected around that station, have detailed plans of how your base camp might look, what routes you have backup plans and shelter options as a plan B, C, and D sometimes. And the aspect of knowing your environment is really key to being able to fulfill these planning steps. So that does mean, for example, studying maps and of course also bringing them, but also drawing from local experience and local knowledge about natural hazards that might exist around the research of infrastructure you're operating in. Collectively preparing also includes training and testing the gear you're working with. And that often, or should ideally, involve using it in scenarios that are as real as possible. So it's very easy to, or it might be very easy to operate an instrument in your laboratory. But if you're wearing thick gloves and it's -degrees and there is strong winds, that same instrument might not be as easy to operate. So testing and training to work with the equipment you're going to bring is really key for preparation, as is completing the necessary training courses and having common briefings so that everyone in the team is on the same page of what to expect and what the plan is. So to take that into account for each and everyone's individual's actions. Related to that, you should prioritize in the time leading up to your fieldwork to check and prepare your equipment, not only to label and to pack it for shipping, but figuring out how to use especially emergency equipment in the field is not the best idea. So test and train with your equipment, also with your emergency equipment. Even if you don't plan to use it, test it and train with it in controlled environments that might be during, or during the travel if there's a stop towards your research infrastructure. But for many, this is probably training that happens at your home institution. For safety relevant equipment, and not only for that, but specifically for that, it's important to bring backup systems, both to have redundancy, but also not to only rely on one device. So for example, when it comes to communication devices or first aid kits, it's really important to have more than two distributed over your group. And often for that, the infrastructures have very specific procedures and checklists what to bring. And your gear can only help you in emergency situations when it's in good condition. Please do not consider emergency gear as something that lives in at the very bottom of your backpack and that you never take out, but inspect it as closely and as frequently as you would do for the scientific instruments that you need for your data. Because if an incident were to occur, it is too late to start realizing that then some parts might be broken, or maybe the batteries of your backup communication device are empty. So storing equipment properly is also something to consider, and that differs again from infrastructure to infrastructure. That might be in a waterproof bag for operating with a Zodiac, and that might be not necessary if you're operating in the Arctic summer in a terrestrial station. Communication can help to avoid incidents. And that means bringing communication devices, different means of communication, but also taking care that they actually work in the conditions that you have to expect, and always plan with some safety margin. So devices that are supposed to be used in a certain temperature range, and you expect temperatures that are very close to that range, are maybe not the best choice for your work. And when it comes to both emergency messages, but also communicating in situations where you might have reduced visibility or reduced means of contact, communication to your team, try to agree on signals and also pre-developed scripts, especially for emergency communication, to make sure that miscommunication isn't the cause for additional risk during your work. While you employ all of these steps in your planning, the main aim that they are working towards is prioritizing prevention. And that extends beyond the planning process itself. It includes assessing risks, and we will look into what a risk assessment is and how to do one in a bit. But risks also develop dynamically. So prioritizing prevention means in the field sometimes to turn around because of human factors too, and not only of environmental hazards. That can be, for example, exhaustion or issues within your team that make it a better choice to turn around early than to have to deal with a problem in the field itself. The same, of course, goes when it comes to weather shifts, or if you recognize the terrain being different than what you've planned and prepared for. So all of these factors summarize, just make sure to not press on with planned work if you already are experiencing minor issues, because going back to what we started with, minor issues can quite quickly develop into major incidents, and that's what you want to avoid from the beginning. And in that sense, it is very helpful to establish a team culture of caution and normalizing that it is good for everyone, each and everyone in your team, to both pause and assess the safety, but also to communicate any risks that one of your team members might recognize. Quickly looking at risk assessments and what they are, we can, and I'll just go directly into why we want to do them, because we've already heard about from that they are an assessment of what risks you can encounter during your fieldwork and how to mitigate them. They often sound formal and are required by your home institution and or the infrastructure operators. But you should really see them as a tool for you as a team that helps you to speak about the risks you might encounter and thus know of them ahead of time and being able to implicate mitigation actions. So don't see them as a tick box you have to check in a list of requirements. See them really as a tool that helps your team to stay safe. A risk assessment can be done in 4 steps. The first one is to identify hazards, and this is an example taken out of the Interact Fieldwork Planning Handbook that Morten mentioned earlier. So for this work, very specific type of work, this could identified hazards or cold temperatures, weather changes, ice or driftwood in the water, a failure of an engine, and a man overboard situation that could develop in a small boat for the last 3 ones. So following this list that can be put together by just brainstorming with your team, you would then assess how probable and how impactful these situations could be for you. And the product of these 2 factors is then that impact that you get. So an event that is likely but has very low consequences should be treated as important as an event that is maybe not so likely but has really high consequences. So in the end, they're considered to have the same impact. The next step, the third step, would then be to plan actions to mitigate and declare the responsibility for these actions within your team, but sometimes this also involves the infrastructure. To have a plan that you are not only aware of these risks, but you're actually working against them becoming a problem for your team. And all of that should be well documented, again, not for bureaucratic purposes, but for your team to revisit before and during your work as a document that is part of your plan to stay safe. Being part of your plan to stay safe should ideally also be a code of conduct that you develop together that is accompanied by a general culture of safety within your team. And I've just here put on the slides an example of field code of conduct that was developed by the University here in Tromsø, the Department of Geosciences, that I wanted to highlight as one example. And your institution might or might not have a fieldwork code of conduct. But if this is not brought up in your planning process, then it's worth looking into that and checking with your institution if that exists, and if not, starting the process to develop it together with your team, because that fieldwork code of conduct touches on various aspects. It's not only about team culture, it's also about the environmental impact. It's about how to both make your fieldwork safe, but also more efficient for everyone and have a better outcome for your team and your science. And often these fieldwork codes of conduct include various mechanisms that are in place, and that could be established check-ins, that could be also reporting routines. But most importantly, they try to get everyone on the same page of how to work together in the field. And working together in the field and creating a safe environment in that space is really a shared responsibility. So safety is not just the responsibility of a team leader or not the team leader, but everyone else. It's the responsibility of each member of your team to contribute to that. And if things don't go as planned, also reviewing them together, learning from them, and turning that into better practices in these various aspects of safety. So to just briefly summarize these approaches to increasing safety in the field, it is again, you will hear this quite a few times today, to prepare thoroughly and make very detailed plans, but also then in the field and before and after too, to communicate clearly and look out for your team members, in addition to respecting the environment that you're working in, but also learning from mistakes. We are all humans and we do make mistakes, and the better our plan is, the less impact they hopefully have. But it's normal to make mistakes, and it's just good practice to learn from them and don't repeat them. And that includes learning from mistakes others have already made. So actually talking about what went wrong is a key aspect of improving safety too. Learning from, not necessarily only mistakes, but also experiences of others can include looking into existing training resources. And again, I want to highlight the Interact Fieldwork Planning Handbook that has very detailed information, and that is developed by a project on a very broad level. But then you can look into some institutions that might have very specific training, but also, again, the infrastructures that have advice or specific procedures that you should learn about with regards to safety in the field. And again, please seek the practical training you need, because we can't replace that with any online training a project can offer. With that, I would stop that presentation here for the safety. And then we would move on to the next presentation from Amy, who will talk more about environmental impacts and how to minimize them during your planning and in the field. And just remember that we will take questions to this whole block after the 3 presentations in this block. So if there are any questions you have, please feel free to already put them in the chat now or note them down, but we will come back to that later in the program.
Yeah, perfect. No, thanks for inviting me to talk today. I think you've led on really nicely into this talk about kind of assessments and how to structure them. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we assess and then hopefully take the steps to reduce our environmental and social impacts, specifically the negative ones of all science activities, whether that's going into the field or also just in general, day-to-day science. So I'll stick to the main points going into the field, but a little background. So my name is Amy McFarlane. I am currently a postdoc up at UIT in Northumbria, and I've been leading the APECS RISE. So it's like a responsible science initiative, which sits as a project group within APECS. So I've been leading that for this is our 3rd year. So I've been thinking a little bit about this topic for a while, and I have experience going into the field, which I'll talk a little bit about later. But to start with, I put together I started putting together the literature that I have on my desk, and it got a little bit overwhelming. So, what scientists are good at is documenting and then publishing. So we have, it's not new knowledge that science has an environmental and social impact. We enjoy, documenting what those could be and also documenting what the steps that we need to take to reduce them. So I don't know if people want to, I don't know, like take screenshots of this, but I can also, within the RISE group, we're putting together all of this literature to kind of group the knowledge that we have so far. So there's a lot out there, but I think one of the main things to take away from this is that it's so dependent on the approach that you're taking, the fieldwork that you're doing, where you're doing it. So it's not like one size fits all for assessments of environmental impact. So that's one of the really main key points to take away. There are also quite a few regulation and guidelines out there already, which are really useful. They've got, you know, it's not the first time that we're thinking about this topic. So depending on where you want to reduce your travel, or sorry, where you want to reduce your impacts, whether that's fieldwork, travel to your fieldwork or to conferences, lab work, that lab work can also be like based around doing the fieldwork, and also modeling, you know, after you've collected the data and everything. And depending on the guidelines that you need to do your impact assessment, really depends on where you are and what you're who you're working with, and in what regions you're conducting this study. So here I just put this really quickly together this morning, and some examples of where you could potentially go. But it's really focused on like this kind of branching of how, when you get to certain levels, you're either going to be looking at national guidelines or going to very specific niche websites to find out more information. So it's quite hard to keep this quite general. But some really nice guidelines that are out there that are specific for fieldwork, and they've been mentioned, other versions have been mentioned in the past in this webinar, but they interact guidelines. So there's one which is about reducing plastic consumption and pollution in Arctic research stations. There's another about reducing the environmental impacts of Arctic fieldwork. So this is very general and really good. I'd recommend to have a look at that. Also reducing the CO2 emissions in Arctic science. This one's based a lot about, there's a lot of focus on travel in this one. And then there's the European Polar Board have produced a synthesis report on their environmental impacts and really how to do an impact assessment. And I've worked a lot with this because we did an environmental impact assessment for the Mosaic expedition, which I'll talk a little bit about later. But we really use this as a basis, tailored a little bit, and I think that's one of the important takeaways, is that it's not this one size fits all, and it's going to have to be like malleable and adaptable depending on the project. But yeah, there's really a lot of guidelines out there, also from the Arctic Council on good practices, for example. Another one, you know, it's a lot. So I think depending on where you're sourcing this information from, it can be some really good advice out there. The only difficult thing is knowing where to get it from and knowing where the most relevant document is for you. And I think that's where POLARIN comes in really nicely, because they're kind of setting up this framework and gathering all of these documents together. So going back to the beginning, like, why are we wanting to conduct environmental impact assessments in the first place? One of the main things is to mitigate the environmental damage, but also the social negative impacts of working in these remote areas. Also the ability to use more of the data. So if you reduce the impact, you're going to have less of a footprint on your local surroundings, and it's going to be a win-win for everyone. And then the next part, safeguarding biodiversity. I just said that before. The social impact helps current planning and advice for future. So I think the more we document now, the better we can do in the future. So really having these best practices or lessons learned, which are made public and available for people to learn from in the future. And I think that's also a really important thing, is this open access of impact assessments. And finally, just to ensure compliance with international environmental regulations, depending on where you are, there are regulations, and we talked a little bit about needing permits, for example. Like this isn't a perfect example of that. One really important thing before even thinking about environmental impact assessment is to really figure out who is responsible to do it. So there's a lot of different ways, and depending on where how your work is set up, this can have many different forms. So there's like the top down. So I would say like this is an institutional level. So for example, BAS have just completed a really nice impact assessment with all their carbon emissions for 2023-24. I'd recommend having a look at that. But also, I have an example of Avi doing a facts on sustainability. So this is quite a small study of environmental impact of the Mosaic expedition, and I'll talk a little bit about that more after. There's also a top-down push that can happen from funding bodies. So, for example, when people apply for project funding, if, for example, the funding body has like a small part in the application to say, like, think about your environmental footprint, which is what the Swiss Polar Institute have started to do with this like carbon assessment tool that you need to now include in all funding applications. So there's a bit of a shift happening there, and we're seeing it more and more with these funding bodies who are implementing this. But in the end, those are actually being pushed onto individuals to do the impact assessments, or project leaders. So, is this the best way to go? It's a bit of a debate, I would say. And then finally, impact assessments could also be done by organizations and nonprofits. For example, geoengineering applications, environmental impact assessments are so critical to moving forward with geoengineering. So it's really at the forefront of how are we setting up, in particular. So Antarctica is a little bit different, right? So we have the frameworks there in place, but the Arctic, it's really critical to have frameworks set up, whether that's national. International is very difficult, so I would stick to national frameworks. So I guess for people going into the field, try and understand, are there any frameworks in place? And if not, try and set them up. Like this is really a critical time to start pushing for more frameworks, for more guidance on this topic. Which kind of leads me to this next bottom-up approach, which is also a method that's happening at the moment. To do environmental impact assessments that's not coming from the general, you don't have to do them, but there's a group of people getting together and contributing this expertise because they think that there's a gap in the knowledge or a gap in what's already been assessed. So I was actually part of a team who were doing this for the Mosaic expedition. We realized that there was so much change that happened because it was also the year of COVID. So the initial assessment that was done just wasn't sufficient for the actual, how the expedition planned out in the end. So a group of early career researchers got together to do an impact assessment for the Mosaic expedition. And there was a lot of things that we learned in this process. And I think one of the main things to take away from that is that if it's not there already, like if there's no framework to set up an impact assessment, there's lots of people around who are very willing to help. And you can take parts from other impact assessments, like the other frameworks that are out there, to kind of help build this this structure. So there's and I guess one of the main things that we realized, so we did our expedition, our impact assessment upon returning. So what we found, one of the main barriers that we had was actually collecting the data. So like one of our key takeaways was to doing this process was really like this needs to be thought of at the beginning and like implemented throughout. So really at the beginning, the impact assessment needs to be started. And then you can set up So for example, you can actually set up areas where you could collect more data during the fieldwork process to actually kind of assess the impact that you're having, which is very important and very missing currently. So there's like the different timelines of environmental impact assessments. And then finally, like when you return, to actually like review the impact and to put the steps out there, like very, very clear, like this is what we've learned and this is what we can do in the future to reduce our impact. And I think that takeaway is the most valuable thing that you can do in this whole process. There we go. So there's a lot of text here, but for example, we thought of some key questions to think about beforehand. I'm just going to highlight this final one here. So who is responsible for compiling the data and doing the assessment? Like really important thing to think about before you go into the field. And then the next one is ensure sufficient data is being collected during. So we split our data up into 3 different sections. So I'm just checking I'm not going over time. So for example, we did a collection of parameters from logistics. So for example, how much fuel we needed, but then we also sent surveys to all the participants. So that was like a very separate method of collecting data. But it would have been really nice to have a full list of, like participants, but also that they were aware that this assessment was going to be coming. So we kind of got back, everyone left, went to their next job, and then we were like, okay, wait a sec, come back. Like we need to get a bit of information from you. So that was like a little bit annoying to do that assessment after returning. And then finally, we're collecting measurements. So we had really opportunistic data that we could use for the assessment. So for example, like atmospheric aerosols. So actually there was filtering that was turned on when the exhaust was kind of coming around to the measurement containers. And we kind of asked to see if we could have that data. There was a lot of data from, ocean sampling when the ship kind of like reduced, kind of expelled the wastewater. So we could use that data set to kind of understand what could be the impacts of the wastewater. Things like microplastics, like the opportunistic sampling was really interesting to start digging into. So, and we've also had like, if we went on an expedition like this again, we're missing areas in this X, Y, and Z. So having that kind of in the forefront of people's knowledge before going, I think it's really important. And then finally, we thought about introducing like an index. So trying to assess what the impact of an expedition of such a size is, and then using that to then compare to other expeditions. Because I think it'd be really nice in the future to try and understand, like the scientific output relative to the impact of such an expedition. And I think this is kind of like a scientific H index. I think this is changing over time. Sorry, not the impact index, but the scientific impact changes over time. So I think this is kind of like could be quite a nice calculation to do and compare different fieldworks. So I think, I don't know if I've kept it brief. I have no idea what time it is, but I'm just going to now go to some takeaways and kind of finish up with this and just say that, it's very hard for me now to like dive into each way of doing an impact assessment, but the framework and the guidelines are out there. It just depends on what type of fieldwork that you're doing. But one really important thing that we need to improve on is like the infrastructure to find these guidelines and regulations, because like it's kind of a bit of a soup that we're trying to dig into at the moment. And I think POLARIN is a really good kind of initiator of this. Find out who is responsible to do your impact assessment if you're about to go into the field. See if the process has already been started. They might not have thought about this yet, so I think raising the question, I think it's a very important step. A central database for lessons learned. I showed you all of the literature before, so I guess if you could kind of like filter through all of these and pull out lessons learned, that would be ideal. But no one has time for this. So I think this kind of a database where you could maybe put in some keywords and pull out some interesting, okay, like one person did this and they learned this. I think that would be a really useful tool for the future. And then also, I think everyone, in this chat or in this group, either is going into the field, so has interested in this topic, or has generally thought about impact of scientific activities. But how do we reach those who aren't necessarily interested in the topic, so won't kind of attend webinars like this one? And I think that's where I'm going to finish. And I'd just like to say, if anyone is early career and interested in joining discussions like on this topic, then feel free to reach out and join the APECS RISE project group.
Thanks a lot, Amy. And I know you have to leave in a few minutes, so if there are any questions to Amy, we can take them directly now. Okay, if not, reach out to Amy via email. And again, thanks a lot for all the work you're doing and also the RISE project group is doing. Okay, for this next session, I just like to give a short introduction before we move on to have another external speaker with us. And in this session, we want to briefly look into collaboration and approaches to engaging local and indigenous communities in the Arctic, which is the home of more than 4 million people. And I use the number 4 million here, which is not the number of indigenous people in the Arctic, but it's roughly an estimate of how many people live in the Arctic, because while these approaches are informed and especially important for collaborating with indigenous communities, they also apply to local communities. And if you look into a map roughly of the territories of indigenous peoples in the Arctic, you see that it's circumpolar. So basically, anywhere you work in the Arctic, there is some relation to the lands and waters of indigenous people, just to highlight why this topic is so critical for everyone to consider in their work in the Arctic. But that being said, we can also all learn from these collaboration models independently of where we work in. So when it comes to collaborating with local communities, for example, in gateway cities to Antarctica, or stakeholders in other areas of polar research, we can learn from these models of collaboration. And to address the history of Arctic research and also the way forward, different organizations, especially again of indigenous peoples organizations, have developed guidelines and protocols. For example, the Circumpolar Inuit Protocols for Equitable and Ethical Engagement, and which mostly come from the side of the Arctic, which is home to the Inuit. But then related to SAPMI, there's the Roadmap to Decolonial Arctic Research, and another document that just now was developed to inform the ICAR process. And I really recommend all of these 3 documents as reading for those of you that do Arctic research, to inform yourself, educate yourself, and understand the perspectives of the people that live in the Arctic and how your research can benefit them. Because one of the protocols that these guidelines highlight is that research in the Arctic should serve the people in the Arctic. And besides the other protocols that define how respectful collaboration can be done, this is an important point to consider. And in these documents, which are quite practically oriented. They are really helpful, both for those that already have experience working in the Arctic, but also for those that are new to it. A strong recommendation to read and learn from these guidelines that the various organizations have developed and provide as information on how to collaborate. And we wanted to make this session, again, focus on the practical aspects of how that can actually look like in a real project. So I'm very happy and grateful that Diana can join us today. And I'm very sorry for the very inconvenient time this webinar happens for you. So a big thank you for being here with us today. Sharing a bit about
for inviting.
and sharing a bit about your work and how you approach this in your research. So thanks again for being here. And maybe would you like with starting to introduce yourself and then also sharing a bit about the work you are doing?
Yeah, sure. Do you hear me well? Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Diana Khyziakhmetova, and I'm a researcher with background in urban planning and geography. I am currently a PhD student at the University of Arizona, and it's 6 a.m. here, but I'm still happy to be with you. I am Tatar, Udmurt, Russian, and Ukrainian. Tatar and Udmurt are indigenous peoples in Russia, but they are not recognized as indigenous. And because of that, for a long time, all this indigenous context was really far from me, and I didn't really understand that it relates to my life and it relates to life of a lot of people. I earned Master of Science in Urban Planning, and I was working for some time as community engagement specialist, and didn't really question the ethics of how we engage with local communities. That changed when I started my master's degree in geography in George Washington University in Washington, D.C., because I was invited to join Arctic research projects, went to Alaska and to Canada for the first time, started to talk to indigenous and local communities there, and realized that there are a lot of people there, and not always they are asked about their opinions, not always they're asked what kind of research they are interested in and how they want to participate in that. My research is a very mixed methods kind of thing, and I do a lot of remote sensing and GIS analysis, but I also conduct interviews with the local residents. And one project I was especially involved in was about open public spaces in Alaskan cities. So I was talking to local residents, and I also approached local parks and recreation department when I was talking about how do they engage with the indigenous communities. They said that they actually do not, and they don't really know the way to work with indigenous communities, though around 10% of the city's population is indigenous. That was kind of a turning point for me, because I realized that it's important to amplify indigenous voices, and not only in local governance, but also in wider polar research community. And when I work with local and indigenous communities, I think that it's important to remember that I cannot speak for indigenous and local communities, but I can make sure that their perspectives shape my work and work of my colleagues. And just coming from the background I'm coming from, and just knowing how research works, I feel like it's always important to check your privileges. Remember that there are power relationships, power hierarchy and relationships in research, and there is also always someone who will listen to more, who speaks, and whose knowledge is valued. And I hope that we can think more about bringing indigenous knowledge into polar research that we are doing. So That's my introduction.
Thank you for that introduction. Yeah, maybe we can start with going a bit more into your research, and maybe you can share what effect including local perspectives had on your research.
I think that it's always great when your research is grounded in reality, and when local community guide or at least participate in this research, it really gives it depth and accuracy, and you gain a lot of knowledge and stories that you cannot get from anywhere else. You can go through all academic materials published, you will never hear the stories about place that can actually really affect your work and improve your work. And I think that's important from the side of meaning and depth, but it's also what I noticed in my work and work of my colleagues. When you write grant applications and you say that you actually have connections with local community, you actually were collaborating with them and they are interested in your research, it adds some bonus points to your research proposal, and a lot of times it looks beautiful and it differs you from all other projects that have a distance and don't really have a grounded relationship with place and community. So I think that there are multiple ways why it's great to have local perspectives in your research.
And for you personally, what is the most rewarding aspect of working together with the local people?
I think that it's just rewarding to do meaningful work. I feel like we all get overburdened. We not always get a lot of money for our research. We always face constant deadlines. We have millions of papers to write at the same time, and sometimes I myself wonder, what am I doing this for? Why is this important? And I feel like when the work is rooted in relationships, it's rooted in real life and life of real people, and they can be impacted by the research. It really inspires me and energizes me, because it's not just me working on my laptop, but it actually a connection with community and something that can benefit them. So sometimes academic metrics might stop inspiring you, but people, I feel like, never do.
That's a wonderful quote. I'll have to note that down. Speaking to that connection, how have you managed to stay connected with the people you work with when you're not in the field?
That's tough, but there are social media, and you can follow people on Instagram. For Alaska, Facebook is really popular, and it's a great way to stay in touch and to know what's going on in community. Another thing is when you do build relationships and you do start collaborations, you hop on Zooms every now and then, and you check what's going on, and you have some meetings, you discuss things that you want to discuss with them, they ask all the questions. So technologies are great for staying in touch with community. There was one woman who asked for my address and actually wrote me a handwritten letter to DC, which was super nice. And so we do have technology, but we can also make it more romantic and old style and actually have written communication with some people who especially touched our hearts.
Yeah, well, that's great also to hear some more, just practical recommendations on how to approach that. And yeah, with your experience in like working in the Arctic, collaborating with different communities, I guess there's also for all of us, there is so much to learn. And I mentioned that in the safety presentation earlier. Sometimes we have to learn through making mistakes. So yeah, what is we have a special emphasis on collaboration when we make these mistakes. what is important on how to learn from them and improving then moving forward?
Yeah, I think it's important not to be afraid of mistakes. We all are learning. It's never-ending process, and we are improving our rules and guidelines and communication and everything. So it's all part of the process. I feel like it's important to stay honest and open and respectful. If you did do a mistake, that's okay. Just all about that. Just be honest about it and apologize. And I feel like just this honest human connection can show the community that you really care. It's not something formal. You actually care. You actually are sorry. And I feel like it makes the whole difference not to stay distant and close down and never talk or something like that. I think it's always just important to stay open and honest and respectful and respect indigenous knowledge that is being shared with you. Stay humble, listen, don't argue. People open their hearts, so be gentle with that. And I feel like sometimes it's important, if you have all this intention and desire to collaborate, be mindful again of this power relations. Maybe you do have time to do this research, but the community might not, and that's okay too. I feel like the worst is to push people and to be more aggressive, where it's important to give space for community to decide if they want to engage in research or not. Another way is that you could still keep it a dialogue and ask how can you make them feel comfortable to engage in the research. And if they say to me, they were saying like, we don't have resources, we don't have people, we don't have money to and time to be engaged, and then it's your turn to look for grants, to look for money, and come back with resources. So community benefits from participation in the research. So it's not about like just you winning and you getting this community to work in your research, but it's actually making it beneficial for everyone and building something together.
Yeah, thank you. And you've already shared so many tips and recommendations, but I still wanted to ask if you have any either like very practical tips or maybe some reading recommendations that you would want to share with people that are willing to learn more when preparing for the next field trip.
Yeah, I think first thing is to say well done that you want to learn more, because I'm just getting to my field trip in a week and I know that there is a lot to prepare before that. But if you have an intention to talk to people, first of all, just study the local history and indigenous communities in the area. Then you can go to Google and look for what kind of events are happening during your field trip. And maybe you can just go to events and connect with community very, very informally. If there are specific institutions in place that you feel like you would love to learn more about and maybe talk about future collaborations, don't hesitate and just email them. And sometimes it takes time, so it's good to maybe write in advance so people can actually find time to connect with you and maybe have a coffee or two together. For me, what worked when I was coming as a student, but not only to a new or the community I don't know very well, I was always bringing some gifts from my university or from the town I was living. It's something small, but it creates this reciprocity where you're talking and you are giving something back, and people really remember that and they really appreciate that you were thinking about them when you were coming from far away to learn more about them and their culture. And this can then build into long-term connections, and maybe you'll have again someone you will write letters to. We'll see. I think that there is a lot of things going on in research that you can learn, you can read more about, like participatory action research, indigenous data sovereignty, a lot of methods and ways to be more respectful with indigenous and local knowledge in the research that you are doing and in communications that you are building. Always remember about consent. Please ask about that. It should be informed and prior before you do anything in the area. I think that, yeah, it's important to think about benefits for the community too, not just your research, how it can benefit community, how it can make some relationships, and if you can really build long-term relationships, if you can actually come back to this place and stay in touch with this community, involve community in all stages of research possible, from maybe at some point starting project together to sharing results to building all the principles of projects, and yeah, everything like that. I'm still learning. Everyone is still learning. It's okay. There is a lot of resources, and just keep exploring, keep sharing, and be respectful. I think that's the main thing.
Yeah, that's a great summary. You mentioned that you're going to Alaska, I think next week. So what are you most looking forward to?
That will be funny. I live in Arizona right now, but I'm originally from Russia. In Alaska, they have birch trees, so I'm gonna hug birch trees first time I'll be there. And I'm ordering lots of notebooks just to make as many notes as possible, to collect all opinions, all worries, all questions people have, and then think how we can use and develop that in our research.
Yeah, I can relate to missing the trees. I have that sometimes too. Yeah, is there anything else you want to share before we move on?
I think that's the main thing. I feel like I think it's great that we are having this kind of conversations and trying to connect Western science and indigenous and local knowledge. And it's a process. Sometimes we don't know how to make it, but the main is just to have an intention to make it harmonious and beneficial for everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Diana. And again, yeah, very grateful to have you in what is very early morning hours for you. So with that, we are coming to the end of this block, but now we have still a few more minutes to take questions. I don't see now if Amy is still here, but if there are any questions either to the first or the third part of this part of the webinar, we have some time to answer them now. Yeah, Morten. Oh, you're still muted.
If not others, then I have a comment or first of all, Diana, thank you for a very nice presentation. You are a wonderful person. I think I wanted to share my experience in relation to, you could say, cooperation between scientists and local people from living 8 years in a small, solely Inuit community in Greenland, and with hundreds of scientists coming each year. And you know, what I've been seeing very much is that the funding agencies, they demand some kind of local involvement, and the scientists haven't got a clue what to do about it. And then they apply and they try to make some explanations in relation to how they will involve local people. And it all often ends up with the local people being Zodiac drivers for them or something like that, snowmobile drivers or something like that. And that is so much a pity, because there's so much knowledge embedded in the local communities. Of course, it's people who have been living there and who have a tradition going many hundred years back about living in these areas, and they know the natural conditions, they know the environment. And what I have always also experienced is that it's so difficult to comprehend from a scientific perspective, we believe in machineries and stuff like that, instead of talking with people until the time where you need to do some sampling on unstable sea ice just outside the research station. Then have never experienced somebody not asking a local to join them, you know, and being able to work safe on the sea ice demands a lot of knowledge that is, of course, extremely important in relation to work. So what I've been trying to, you could say, suggest to people coming to the research station is that normally you could say they spend 95% of their time out in the field and 5% in the town. Maybe change that to 20% in the town and 80% out in the field. Go to the bars, talk with people, and also talk with people about your projects, because they will be able to supplement with something beneficial. So that was just what I wanted to say.
Yeah, thank you for also sharing that experience. I'm just looking if there are any other comments or questions. But if not, then I would suggest that we take another short break and again come back 20 past the hour, so in 5 minutes, to then start with the training on data stewardship, which will also include a section on the indigenous data sovereignty Diana mentioned, but also include some like very practical relevance for everyone receiving a POLARIN transnational access, and some guidance on how to plan for collecting that data in a good and efficient way. Again, thank you a lot for joining us today, Diana, and hope the trip goes well, and then looking forward to catching up with you after. Okay, great. Then we're going to move on to the next section, and again, we'll have another short break and the chance to ask questions after the presentation. So we are very aware that this is a long event, but we're trying to pack all the information into it that you need for your planning. And that includes planning for data stewardship, which now will be presented by Maria Claudia, Dan, and also myself for a short part of it. But it's mostly organized by the work packages in POLARIN that are also working on the data management. And I'm sure Dan will tell a bit more about that in a second.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction, Axel. So there's many people involved in the data part of the POLARIN project, and I will introduce you a bit on the specific tips that we can provide for you on how to provide your data, but also give some background information on what are good data management practices. And I will first go into the FAIR data guiding principles, basically covering what are they and why are they important for you as well. Because most of you probably will have heard of these guiding principles before, but I think it's good to reiterate to get everyone on the same level. And I think the most important question basically that people tend to forget is, how does this scientific data that I collected benefit society, and why should I care that my data is available for everyone? And here I present to you some maps of services that incorporate a lot of data into them. So we see, for instance, the land and ocean temperature anomalies for a certain year versus the historical average. We see like snow cover maps. We see ice cover, ice extent maps, and all of these services are basically data services that both include very broad scale, lower resolution products such as satellite remote sensing data, but also they can incorporate one-off data sets. So like data sets that have been gathered from cruise missions or weather stations, so that are just point data. and time series, and all of these can work together to create these kind of services, and these can be very helpful and also impactful for society. There's many people that use these kind of services on a day-to-day basis to keep our society running, basically. So, and that's also why we need all of the research data to feed into these. There's some examples I can give. So, for instance, this is GBIF, the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, and here we see a map of the dispersion of the Saxifraga species, the cute little purple flowers, and we see on the left a map of all of the different observations as it was in the fall of 2024, I believe, and where this Saxifraga has been observed. And you can see that all of these observations might be singular data sets, but because this service, they're all formatted correctly in the same standardized way and all uploaded to the same portal, you can see all of the different observations on the same map, and that can be very powerful for other people to find more information on this species, or people from other disciplines to do research on this plant. Basically, for people that are searching for more information on this, this can be a really nice way to for them to have it presented. And it's a very to go even further into this. It's a very cool time to be doing our work as data managers. For instance, this project, Destination Earth, is now active, in which a lot of data from different streams is being brought together. There's a lot of services being developed to showcase cool functionality for seeing like for instance, a digital twin of the Earth, and where you can select different layers of temperature and wind observations, and also biology. So it goes into many different disciplines, and it's very cool that this all will that a lot of data will be fed into this, and it aims to create one singular vision of the Earth, basically. So it's a very cool time to be alive, I'd say. But the question is now also, of course, how can your data benefit society? Because that's you guys will be collecting data through the POLARIN project, and how can you guys contribute? And as I said, it's basically a matter of that your data can feed into these services that we and other people are helping to develop. So these larger remote sensing products, for instance, can be the basis for these services, and then these mission-based data sets such as are collected in POLARIN can then feed into these services as basically one-off data sets. And this sounds like it's not that important, as just like an add-on, but actually these smaller kind of data sets help to give the product in the end a higher resolution, more coverage. They provide a more accurate image of what is actually happening. And it could also mean that there's more variables that are in the end included in the product. So actually a very extensive list of why it's important to include your data into these products. And for this to happen, we need to go from like a fragmented approach to data management to a more unified approach. So where everyone maybe has data lying around in notebooks, for instance. If you have been out on the field, and everyone knows how it goes. You take some measurements, do some observations, you write them down, and then your notebook all of a sudden ends up on a cupboard somewhere. You will never do anything with it again. And we have to go from basically that situation to a situation where everyone collects data in the same way. So you have kind of templates, standards that are being adhered to, and then that feed into the same system so that everyone actually uploads and preserves their data. And it could be someone looking over this, or it can be the researcher themselves. That's of course depending on the project, but we need to go to a more unified approach. And this is not only important for us as data managers. Some people see it as if we are trying to reduce our own workload, but since you will also be using these services in the future, I think it's a great opportunity to be able to contribute to this, and you can also reap the benefits of this for future research and publications. So basically, if you would have collected data at, for instance, this place on the Earth, and you would ask yourself, why is this relevant? There could be many other similar data products being collected in other places of the Earth, and whereas in a historical scenario this would be unknown to you. You might be able, if everyone works in the same standardized way and uploads the data to the same portal in the same fashion, you could see a similar map as the one I showed you for GBIF, that you have a quick overview of what is the data that has been collected for your research topic or any other topic you would be looking for. And if that is standardized in a correct manner, then for some products it's even possible to have a download all button, in which you can maybe download all of these data sets together. You can like play with it on the go, and you can do some operations on the fly. And that is the power of this kind of approach, where you can kind of work with the data as it comes, and most of it you can do online. You don't really need extra resources for this, or need to download the data onto your local computer and work with it yourself. Most of it is you can do using the streaming feature. So that is really the power of this this approach. So how can your data benefit society? I will go into two different topics one topic before I go further into detail on the FAIR principles, which is basically what data centers I should upload my data to, and how they can maximize the potential of your data, or our data, so to speak. Many papers that have been published in the past, or are still published actually, have statements like these. So data availability section, and then there's the notice that the data will be made available upon request, or which is of course not something you would like to see. As a researcher, this creates extra work, and also this doesn't mean it's incorporated in the way that I described earlier. Or you see something like this, where a contribution might be included in the supplementary material, or you can ask the author for further suggestions. Basically, you would have to track and hunt down the data, which is not something you want. The data is important in its own right, and therefore you should treat it that way. You should treat it like it's a publication in itself, basically. And therefore, we in POLARIN we have created something like we will be launching this data hub. And the way it works is that we have many different data centers that will be that are connected. Because they are using the same standards, and we are harvesting metadata from these places. And all of these data centers will then feed into the same system. And basically, if you want, there's many people asking, where should I publish my data? Where should I go to find my data? And the idea is that all of these will feed into the same portal. So for now, this will be the POLARIN Data Hub. And the idea is that all of the data is stored at these different data centers, and we don't need to move any of the data, basically. So that's once again the power of this approach. And the POLARIN Data Hub, like the concept of such a data portal, data hub, isn't something new. There's many more similar data portals available. So we have at our end we have the SIOS data portal, of course, but there's also the SEON data portal. The ones that are listed here, and there are other platforms are also being developed as we speak. So there's either regional or thematic portals that are mostly being developed, of which POLARIN is of course one of them. We focus more on the Arctic and Antarctic regions, basically. But the problem is that we can't really couple every data set to every portal. This would create too much work for data managers and everyone involved. So the issue is that, the image that I just showed you, where everything would feed into the POLARIN Data Hub, is maybe surrealistic. And the reality is that, for instance, a subset of these data centers feeds into the SIOS data portal, and another subset would feed into the POLARIN data portal. And this is basically, what we have to deal with. So then you might be asking, but hey, Dan, what is the what are the what are the data sets that we should upload to, because there's hundreds of these. Which ones should we choose? So that is a very relevant question, I would say. And there's not a one good answer, because everyone's data is different. But I will list to you some details as to what a good data center might offer, so you can make this choice by yourself in the future. A good data center will offer you a DOI, or at least some sort of object identification description. So basically an identifier to your data set that will live on into the future. So you can identify your data set for the time to come. And this will often be given to your data by the data center itself, if you upload your data to them in the right way. And a good data center will offer you curation of your data through time. So often these data centers are very stable, and they have a funding policy that's also very stable into the future. So you can basically, a good data center, you can count on that your data will be available for a long time. A good data center also offers like tools for you that make it easier for you to find the data. So similar to what we are working on in the POLARIN Data Hub, where we have this these search interfaces, both using a map or using a simple search bar. It should be easy for you to fill in some keywords, or basically subset using a time setting, to find your data using these tools. There should be different ways to access your data. So what I just described was basically user input, but you could also request that your data is accessible using machine readable endpoints or APIs, so that you can basically do this automatically with using your own coding, your own scripts, or your own data portal. So we can just feed through the data to other different systems as well. Visualization. So indeed, for instance, maps or other sorts of graphing options. For this, your data really needs to have the right metadata. So you need to make sure that your data includes information on what kind of data it is, what the name of the variables is, and what they mean. So you can basically, there can be services built on top of the data that might show you the temperature profile in the depth, or similar services just on the fly. It's good to think about how these data centers contribute to data access portals. So the POLARIN Data Hub will be one of those access portals. And it's good to check beforehand which data centers link to which data portals for you to know, like, okay, if I upload my data here, it will be showing, it will be popping up in these different places over the internet. And this might be dependent on what your wishes are and what kind of data you have, and also which communities you want your data to be accessible through. And more information on which specific repositories are connected to POLARIN will be given later by Maria Claudia in this presentation. So there's more there. And I will first focus on how to format your data, basically, so that it adheres to these FAIR standards that most of these data centers, or actually all of these data centers, wish for. First is, I want to give you an example of what is not FAIR data. And for instance, this is like this columnar data, and there's you see a few headers. You see temperature, salinity. There could be some other variable in here, date, time, and you might be thinking to yourself, what is not fair about this data? Because it feels like it's, to the human, it seems like easy to understand, easy to comprehend, but there's many different things missing in this in the information of this data. Like, we don't really know what kind of temperature it is. Is it measured at 2 meters, 10 meters in the atmosphere? Is it some certain depth in the ocean? The time, for instance, is it measured in UTC, or is it some other time zone? There's many things here that are not self-describing. So that's what makes this data not understandable by itself. And that's why it's not fair. And I'll go into details on to what is fair data actually then, like what do the letters mean. So the first letter goes into findable. And to achieve this, we really want the data to be deposited in a public repository, as I mentioned. for it to have a DOI and to have rich discovery metadata. So we want to include in, for instance, when was the data captured, but also where, so the geolocation, who captured the data, what are these person's contact details, kind of that kind of discovery metadata. Then we have the A, which stands for accessible. And this is basically covered when the data and metadata are freely available to humans and machines. So both, it should be both accessible by us accessing a data portal, but also machines by APIs or other services. It's to be interoperable. So the I stands for interoperable, which can be tackled using controlled vocabularies for both the data and the metadata, so the information that describes what this data looks like. And the data center that is uploaded to should be supporting interoperability with other platforms. So this is something you can also think about, like, does the data center offer a lot of services on top of the data? And this is something I want to support in the future. Do I want to upload my data to this? And then we have reusability. So the R stands for reusability. And this is tackled by including a license to the data, like that describes how the data can be used in the future. Through POLARIN, we want to have the data openly available. But of course, there can be exceptions. And this is, again, something Maria Claudia can go into more detail about later. And reusability also means that it should be rich in use metadata. So you want to describe your data well in the sense of what does the data mean, basically, because if it's deposited somewhere and it's not clear what the data means, then someone else will see it and quickly realize, I don't know what to do with it, and it won't ever be touched again, basically. So I have some other examples of what makes a fair compliant data format. There's many different data formats that can adhere to these fair data standards, or that adhere to all of these letters. But overall, they should adhere to the following principles. They should adhere to a standardized structure. They should include some sort of metadata as much as possible, basically. They should adhere to controlled vocabularies. You should be using some sort of WMO standard category vocabularies, or other vocabularies that are described by, for instance, these data centers, or in our case, the POLARIN data policy. You should be, the data format should be software independent, so everyone should be able to open it without having to pay for another service. And the data should be well documented and maintained also over time, so that it's preserved. And the data should also be machine readable. So in this sense, you should be able to provide services on top of the data, so that you can build APIs and that kind of stuff around it. But that should be tackled by including most of these other things that I've mentioned before. And then I have some examples of these fair compliant data formats that we at SIOS at least adhere to a lot, and that a lot of that are very accepted in the community. So we have the NetCDF standard, and to be particular, the CF NetCDF standard. And this can be used for many different things. So we have the like measurement time series. It's mostly for physical kind of data. So meteorology, oceanography, point clouds, satellite data, that kind of stuff. That's what it's most suitable for. And then we have, for instance, Darwin Core Archives, which is more popular in the biological community, the ecological community, where there's more observations. It's observation based of separate species, where there's which is more relevant for their community. But the idea is that these are all formats that are self-describing. So you would open the data or look at the data, and both machines and humans will be able to understand just from the data file alone what the data means and what people are supposed to do with it, basically. Also, one more tip is that on a separate field trip, you could have multiple data sets that come out of this, which is an interesting take that I recently thought of. You could have, for instance, one trip in which you both sample reindeer data and you take snow pits. And reindeer data could be, for instance, you could be collecting data on the weight, the size, the behavior of these animals. But you could, in the snow pit data, you could have researched some snow depth, the density of the snow and the temperature. And these different kinds of data don't all have to be ending up in the same kind of data set. You can just from one singular trip create multiple data files. Whereas researchers most likely think of the one field activity as being one different data set. So the top kind of data would be more suitable for a dark or archive, for instance. And because the data set on the bottom half of the screen is more physical based, it should be more suitable for CF, NetCF, for instance. So that's something just to think about when you go into the field yourself. Now we'll go into the advantages of what it means to have fewer standards, both for us but also for you. This means there's fewer standards to get familiar with. So if you are used to using CFNet CDFs, then there's a lot of material out there, and also it's both easy to learn about because a lot of people cover it, but it's also nice that you don't have to go out and learn 10 other standards. You can just continue working with these CFNet CDFs for the years to come, hopefully. It will be easier to share data between disciplines. So only because you know about the CFNet CDFs, your colleagues probably also will, because the idea is that it is a multidisciplinary way of sharing your data. So if you talk about your colleagues from another field, they might also be familiar with CFNet CDFs, whereas if you would have given them your logbook with the reindeer measurements with your handwriting, then they will probably easily get lost. It's also easier to integrate data into services. So for us to build services on top of the data, because it's impossible to start making services on data that's super heterogeneous. And these standards help to overcome that issue. Basically, a question is that we often get asked is, should all the data be fair in the end? It costs me a lot of time. It costs me a lot of energy to make all of my data fair. I'm a very special researcher and I have special needs. Why would I have to adhere to these standards? And for these people, we have the answer of that. It's sometimes it's not really the best way to go, indeed. And there's of course exceptions to the rule. And it should be said that that can also be okay. But it's good to just think about. Because, for instance, a suitable data format might not be available, or it could be impracticable for multiple reasons. Basically, it doesn't fit well into a data format, your data that you collected, or there's an excessive amount of time that's necessary for people that learn the data format or need to get experience with the data format to put the data into this right format, basically. Or there's a very small chance that this data will ever be used again. So why would I put in a lot of time and effort of my own? And for some of these data sets, it might still be important to adhere to some of these data stewardship concepts, so that some of the key variables to have, they make use of the same naming scheme, uses common vocabularies in your field, or other things that are described in the data management plan could still be adhered to, even though that the whole data set might not be put into NetCDF, or you can still use some of these tips that we give you. So that's good to keep in mind. And if you're unsure about anything or anything related to how to format POLARIN data, then you can contact the POLARIN help desk, basically with the email that's also given on the website, but also I just put it here just for future reference. To recap, basically, the data, or if the data isn't fair, it should be at least human readable. So we want to make sure that these controlled vocabularies are used wherever possible. It shouldn't rely on self-formatting. So sometimes you see like these big Excel sheets where a lot of colors are being given, or yeah, a lot of different formulas are being used, but you should not rely on this to make your data understandable, at least, because this will often go wrong if the machine tries to interpret your data. It should be software independent, so use, for instance, instead of Excel sheets, use OpenOffice variants of the same software, or if you're using MATLAB, try to use convert to Python, and yeah, basically use open source freeware. Sorry. And also use templates wherever possible. So if you are collecting data, try to think of, okay, is there already maybe a template available for me to put my data directly in the field into a template, so that it's easier to convert to the digital version later in a correct manner. Also include a README file, so even if there's just a bunch of data that can't be formatted in a fair way, make sure that there's at least like a text file in the same folder that you try to upload somewhere that mentions like the shortcomings of your data, or at least try to explain what the data means, and so the people know how to work with it in the future. All the little steps help, basically. That's what I try to say. So the take-home message here is that, yeah, your data is important by themselves, and try to treat it, try to treat your data as being its own publication. So publish your research data in the same fair, compliant manner to increase the impact of the past and future research. It will not only make me and all the other data managers in POLARIN happy, but also the entire research community. And I really believe that that is the case. So if you have any more questions on how to make your data fair compliant, there's going to be the POLARIN data stewardship training portal that's coming up real soon. It will be connected to the data hub and will be linked to from there as well. That will include a lot of information on how to work with data from the step 0 basically to some more POLARIN specific information. So that's definitely like the place to go to for this project, and it will be ready around or before the end of the year at least. So that's something that we are working on at the moment. For now, I found this fair data self-assessment tool that you could maybe use. That is just a simple checklist that asks you the right questions of if your data is fair or not, and is ready to be shared. And if there's still any questions, you could contact indeed POLARIN at the same email address, or there's a lot of helpful information that Luke Data Manager has made on his YouTube page. And some of these slides that I just included today were also made with the help of Luke. So really go check out Luke. He has a lot of helpful tutorials on how to do some how to work with data and do some data handling using different softwares, and how to also upload your data to different portals. So yeah, check him out for sure. With that, I think we should go to the next topic, which is the care principles. And I would ask Axel to share a screen. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dan, for that intro to the FAIR principles. And while most of you have probably heard of the FAIR principles, maybe not everyone has heard of the CARE principles before, but they are really relevant, especially for work in the Arctic. And often they're referred to when it comes to indigenous data, and we're going to talk about what that actually is in a bit. But they basically should be applied to all data that is collected in the regions that you already saw before. So that is, more or less around the Arctic, wherever you do research in the Arctic. Think about how you can apply these FAIR and CARE principles at the same time. And it's important to highlight that the CARE principles, and again, I will talk about what they actually are in a bit, that the CARE principles don't replace the FAIR principles. They are complementing each other. They are speaking to different aspects of managing data. And while the FAIR principles are mostly concerned with the very technical side of research, the data itself, the CARE principles also speak to a general approach of collaboration. So many of these aspects that you will see now are related to what we've heard earlier on how to approach and engage local and indigenous people in your research. And more specifically, these care principles can inform how data that is concerning indigenous people and their lands and their waters, how you can work with that data for your research in a respectful way. So the FAIR principles have been around for quite a bit. The care principles are being elevated more, and we wanted to use this webinar to introduce them too. And again, for everyone that is not working in the Arctic, it is still because so much of the work that is being done in polar research concerns both poles and maybe has effects of people living in the Arctic, or maybe you as a researcher might transition from working on Antarctic topics to the Arctic at some point. It's still a good tool to have in your toolbox and to be aware about. Similar to the FAIR principles, we'll just go through them letter by letter by the acronym, and the C stands for collective benefit, which is the idea of that the data that is being collected should serve a benefit to the collective and not only to certain individuals. And that includes that the data being collected should be able to be used to improve governance, to improve citizen engagement, and also facilitate development and innovation in the regions where this data is being collected. And all of these principles do, again, not only apply to actually collecting the data, but also are relevant to the planning, are relevant to your data management plan. So for each of them, try to think about how you can implement steps that support these principles from the beginning of your work, which is when you start to plan your work and not when you're actually already in the field. So aiming for equitable outcomes of your research and your research being of collective benefit is the first of the principles of the CARE principles. The second one, the A, is authority to control. And that is speaking to the rights and interests of indigenous peoples to the data they hold. And that might be, more indigenous knowledge, that might be data that is collected by researchers on their land, but in general recognizing that indigenous peoples have a right to govern the data that is concerning them. And that again goes both ways. So for them to govern their data, but also making that data available for their own governance, looking into that and giving the people back the control about this data is summarized under the authority to control. And you might ask yourself how this goes together with accessibility and findability. But there is ways to combine these two sets of principles, and we'll come back to that a bit later. The third one is responsibility, and that is for that basically summarized by everyone showing responsibility for the data you collect and work with. And that really is key to building those relationships that we talked about earlier, and also sharing capacity. And you see that these principles, as are the FAIR principles, are closely linked to each other. So one does not really work without the other. So really try to think them as a set and don't think them individually. And the third one is ethics. And here you also see why the CARE principles are speaking more to an approach to research and not only to how data should be handled. And that with any step of your data processing, you should also consider the ethics that are relevant to how that data is being handled. And here I wanted to highlight that what also came up a bit earlier, involving the people you work with in every stage of the research is beneficial and helps you to actually implement these principles. So across the life cycle of your data, but also across your data systems, that is something to consider. Hopefully this slide would not be necessary because you're just convinced by what you've heard earlier already. But if we try to more formally look into why should we apply these principles, we can assess that on different levels. First, there's on a very broad top level, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And in there, it's very clearly defined that these rights Indigenous peoples have to their data should be respected. And that translates into then protocols that are developed by organizations, for example, the circumpolar Inuit protocols that I mentioned earlier already. But then also on a more practical level, in research permit application processes, you might need to demonstrate how you respect these protocols and basic rights. So being aware of how to apply these care principles in the end will help you to achieve the necessary permit to work in these regions. But it is not only a formality, it's a basic right. And that is really the key message to take with you here. How to actually do that and how to bring these care principles together with the FAIR principles requires quite a bit of effort. It's not straightforward, and it's a process that everyone is still learning how to do it and collectively learning how to do it. And what I want to show here is really just one example of a community data management system that is being applied by ELOCA, which is a project in the US. It's the Exchanging Local Observations and Knowledge for the Arctic. I hope I got the acronym right. But ELOCA works a lot with Indigenous knowledge holders and tries to establish systems that serve their purpose. And some of the learnings from that project and from their data management systems you can apply to your work too. And that is, for example, working within these frameworks and translating them into practice can mean that you have to set up data sharing or data use agreements with the people you work with. And with that, give them the authority to control and give them a voice in deciding who has access to that data and who it should be able to use it. And the same then more speaking to the planning part of your work and what Morten mentioned earlier, in the time you work in your community, sharing capacity and sharing what you learn from that data, communicating these outputs and results is really important, but at the same time gives you the really critical chance to reflect on how you are interpreting it versus who is someone that has the local perspective, is interpreting the data and might be able to draw much better results than we as researchers can do looking at it from a more distant lens. So that, work within the community in a very practical sense, but also formally and clearly establishing rules of how you want to work together helps building trust and achieve these care principles then also in practice. I want to end with just sharing, I think a few recommendations. One for those of you being more interested in the theoretical part behind it. These are not just concepts some data managers have thought about. There's actually quite big organizations behind them that try to continuously improve these principles and how they are applied, and they have various guidelines they adhere to and which they base their work on. So there's a few of those. But then if you want a more practical advice on how to actually implement these principles in your research, then I want to highlight a workshop guidebook / notebook that was produced by the Arctic Data Center together with ELOCA, and also a guideline that is considering Sami traditional knowledge and how to document that in a way that respects the care principles. And with that, I would then hand it back over to the rest of the POLARIN team. And I don't know, I guess it's Maria Claudia presenting now, but I'm not exactly sure. So yeah, back to you to the POLARIN data plans.
Okay, thank you, Axel. I will share my screen. Okay, so let's now, to close this section, analyze together how you can manage your research outputs in order to ensure their availability and utility. Dan mentioned before the benefit for the society, and how let's also analyze together how we can maximize the access and the reuse of your research output in thanks to the POLARIN project. So let's start with definition. What is the data management plan? Is a document that outlines how research data will be collected, organized, stored, shared, and managed throughout the project and after its closure. The data management plan includes details on data formats, metadata model, access policies, and preservation strategies. The DMP must be submitted in open access, SCBI rights, and in this document, you can see that to comply with fairness and openness, we spoke before about this, data, especially new data, should be made available in a trusted repository. POLARIN counts on DMP, which sets the framework for each DMP you prepared to apply to this process. And for sure, this is a living document. Each version provides a snapshot of on how the project deals with open data, open science, ethics, resources for implementing data sharing, some recommendations. So after this first view about what is a data management plan, let's analyze together why it's important, because the name may suggest that the purpose of DMP is to technically describe the way data will be handled, but its actual purpose is to ensure the availability and the utility of your research outputs. The DMP outlines the measures that will be taken in order to maximize the asset and the reuse of the data you are producing. For sure, you presented the DMP. This is an overview of the DMP, the POLARIN DMP template you prepared. You were asked about information about the project, data overview, about some information about metadata and standards, but why we are analyzing, we are requesting all this information? Because we want to ensure that the data resulting from your research activities adheres to Horizon Europe Open Science principles and fully align with POLARIN DMP. For this reason, you are required to provide this plan outlining what data are collected, how they are managed, how where they are stored. No? But you are requested also to follow standardized metadata and licensing practices, including the use of open licenses such as SCBI. And to deposit all the dataset in trusted open access repositories. This allowed your research outputs are publicly available and before the end of the project. And we will analyze now how we can help you by doing all this work. Let's start speaking about CORDIS, because we say that the DMP is important because it ensures the availability and utility of the project research data. In fact, your research data must be accessible in two directions. One to European Commission and the other one to the general public. When the research outputs are available on open access and respect fair principles, and they are published in the correct repositories in the correct way, user can access them directly through CORDIS and the POLARIN data hub. CORDIS is an European Commission tool to assess comprehensive information about European funded research and innovation projects. OpenAIRE is a technical infrastructure harvesting research outputs from connected data providers. By depositing your work on OpenAIRE compliant repositories and providing your project information in the metadata, your publications and data will be automatically become visible on the OpenAIRE portal and in CORDIS as well. By other hand, after you will publish your research outputs in a research infrastructure database or data repositories, in Polar data repositories, or in the Zenodo POLARIN community, and you link, this is very important, your publication using the DOI to the project in the Zenodo community, thanks to the interoperability services, the machine-to-machine communication, and the APIs we are developing, they are harvested into POLARIN data infrastructure services to be accessible through the POLARIN data hub. The main goal of the POLARIN data hub is to offer a single access point to discover and assess the ever-growing heterogeneous collection of polar data and metadata and products for both Antarctic and Arctic poles. So about what we were saying, where to publish your research outputs. You have a first way, a first choice to publish your research output in a virtual access repository. You have a list in this table. The important things to take in mind and is to always remember to acknowledge POLARIN as a supporting grant. This allows the services and the infrastructure we mentioned before to find your research outputs and to link them to the European systems and also to the POLARIN data hub. A second, you have also a more complete and with more links here in this slide. And a second way is to use an OpenAIRE compliant repository, in which way you make sure that you are using an OpenAIRE compliant repository. You can search in a global registry. I've put here two links to find the correct repository, or you can use the Zenodo repository that is an all-purpose open research repository created by OpenAIRE and the CERN and hosted by the CERN to deposit your publication and the dataset free of charge. And but it's important in any OpenAIRE compliant repository always to use to mention the POLARIN as a supporting grant, And if you are publishing in, and also if you are publishing in any repository, publish also your DOI, your research output using your DOI and acknowledging for the POLARIN a supporting grant in the Zenodo, in POLARIN Zenodo community, in order for the system for coordinates for the POLARIN data hub to find your research outputs. About the data embargo, the POLARIN grant agreement mentioned as usual that the maximum time allowed is are 2 years. And you have to explain very well in the data management plan why you are asking for a data embargo in order to be completely transparent. But you are always under the principle of as open as possible, as close as necessary. So for this reason, you have to motivate this request. And in any case, the related metadata have to be deposited after the quality control on the data has taken place. And about the POLARIN community on Zenodo, we mentioned that we have a POLARIN, we have a community in Zenodo. Also, Zenodo is a repository, so it provides a DOI, but POLARIN has also 200 gigabytes of space for digital items to collect also any kind of your data sets. We have prepared also some guidelines to upload the research output in Zenodo. And it's very important to take in mind that the Zenodo POLARIN community is for deliverables, official dissemination materials, the data sets produced during the research activities financed by the project, and the complementary repository is also a complementary repository for code, notebooks, this kind also of products. And for this reason, about the publication of code, we can just highlight that we have a GitHub repository, also it's a POLARIN GitHub repository, and has been created to host code for data processing tools for the work package 4 and 5. If you have some code published in your GitHub, please publish also, use this information to publish also your products on Zenodo using this space, software space, and inserting the right link to your products, your code, your notebooks. And this is all from my side.
We are almost done. Thank you so much for everyone that is still staying with us through this long webinar. We really appreciate that. Okay, then we're back for the last session of this webinar, which will start with Eva and focus on the POLARIN Ambassadors Program. Yeah, please go ahead, Eva.
Thank you very much, Axel. And thank you very much for inviting me to the webinar. So I'm going to give you a short presentation on a very fun part of the POLARIN project, which is called POLARIN Ambassadors Program. And it's a program that launched just recently, but maybe you have already read some information on the POLARIN website. But I'm going to tell you something about it anyway. What is actually Ambassadors Program? POLARIN Ambassadors Program was created for POLARIN users of users of POLARIN services, or those of you selected applicants to the first call that will use POLARIN services. So the program is an exciting opportunity for all of you to share your unique experiences and insights using POLARIN services or accessing different infrastructures with us, and so inspire others, and also contribute to the continuous improvements of POLARIN services. What do we want from you? We want from you to share your experiences with us from the beginning of your journey to vision. And we really want to support your creativity and showcase your work beyond traditional academic publications. We also want to build a vibrant and collaborative network of POLARIN service users, and we want to connect people, maybe not just on the professional level, but also personal level. And I believe that there will be also different opportunities for POLARIN ambassadors in the future. So we want to continue working together or collaborating together in the future, and maybe create some nice and engaging events that POLARIN ambassadors will be able to join. So what we are planning is to send all POLARIN ambassadors package via email that will include content creation guidelines and a submission form that will help all ambassadors to collect and send us their content. In addition to that, we might also send a little surprise, like small physical packages to the project leads with some POLARIN merch, stickers, and so on. So you can expect this from us. And I mentioned the content creation guidelines. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. So the content creation guidelines were created for future POLARIN ambassadors or people keen to share their content with us. And the aim of the guidelines is to help, I guess, most of you to produce consistent, engaging, and high-quality content aligning with the project. Also, I would like to say these guidelines are not meant to tell you what you should do. They are just really here to guide you, because many people, many of you might not have any experiences with creating content, which means taking photos and videos. So in this package of the content creation guidelines are included content types, so some suggestions of what you could create, take photos or take videos. These are really basic types, but I want to highlight that this is very much open to your creativity, so you can really come up with your own ideas of what kind of content you want. It does not need to be videos, but you can also write stories or blogs. Then we also suggest some ideas and tools for content creation. Again, it's very much open to your creativity. And we also include visual platform-specific legal and ethical guidelines, and then also video and photo creation best practices. I don't want to go into details of all parts of the guidelines because it's very specific to what you decide to do. But I would like to give you just some suggestions on the content creation. So here is some brainstorm. You can see some brainstorming on the screen, and as you can see, what we are suggesting to do is you can really it's open to any ideas you might have. So you can start with also more professional content creation, such as focusing on your research. provide information about your research and the research priority, what are you doing and why, raise awareness of polar science and environmental challenges, focus on increasing visibility and engagement from scientific community, share your experience of using selected polar research infrastructures, and also focus on how did access to the polar research infrastructures help you with your research, how was your travel experience, or provide stories or challenges encountered during the fieldwork. So it varies from your research to you can also forget about the research and just talk about your experience. Based on what you decide to do, I think first important step is just to have this idea of what to share with us. Based on then that, you can check the guidelines and decide if you wanna be taking photos, videos, and then some best practices. They are very specific. So based on what you are doing, it's important to think of the way you are doing it. So just an example, if you are taking photo, in these guidelines, we recommend take a high quality photo. Based on what is in the picture, take a landscape picture. Think of what you want to show by this picture. These guidelines will be shared with all of you using POLARIN services, and you might wonder how to submit the content. We will also share with you a survey that will help you to submit the content. And there will be also more information included in the survey. So that's all from my side. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And you're also very much welcome to contact us whenever you have any questions.
Thanks again also to all of you who spoke today and presented and are part of that team. So yeah, thank you to all speakers that contributed to this webinar. We are available to reach out to if you want to share any training resources that we should include in the posters we're developing in the online platform, in any of the material for the project, because we know there are many great training resources that already exist, and we really try to bring them together and make them accessible to everyone, also to those who are not direct users of the transnational access of POLARIN. And then I briefly wanted to highlight that the next call for transnational access applications will also open later this year. So if you either did not apply or were not successful this year, there are annual calls to access the POLARIN infrastructures. So stay tuned for more information about that on the official POLARIN channels, on which we will also share the training resources once they are publicly available. And with that, if there aren't any other questions or comments, we have reached at least the end of the official program. So thanks again all for being here for the webinar today.